We're here today with President Joan Coley, interviewing her in conjunction with the Carroll County Community Media Center for the Oral History Projects. And if it's okay with you, we'd just like to ask you a couple questions about your experiences here at McDaniel.
Sure.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about your experience as the first woman, not only the first woman president, but the first woman professor at McDaniel?
Well, I came in 1973, and I was fresh out of graduate school, and there were not nearly as many women professors as there are today. And when I came, I found that my salary was 15% lower than a man with comparable credentials who was hired at exactly the same time in exactly the same department as I was. I went to the dean and I pointed this out, and he acknowledged that my credentials were as good as the man's credentials and that the only difference was our gender, and then proceeded to tell me that it would take a number of years for me to catch up with him. When I became pregnant, I was the first person that they could remember on the faculty who became pregnant, because at that point faculty wives became pregnant, but faculty women were either postmenopausal or single, I suppose. And so when there was no maternity policy for faculty, and they just told me to do whatever I wanted in terms of maternity policy. Then I became the first woman provost, and at that point I took a look at the salaries between men and women, the differentials, and there were definite gender differences, and we rectified those. And so what you'll find today is there aren't gender differences in salaries between men and women. And then obviously became the first woman president as well. And I don't know how being a woman has affected my presidency. I think possibly there are some people, males on the faculty, who may find it difficult to have a woman in charge, and I'm sure there are some alums who find it difficult. It hasn't been difficult for me, but I'm sure there are others who might find it a bit strange.
Okay, and can you tell us a little bit more about Title IX that we talked about a little earlier?
Yes, Title IX, as you know, is the legislation that had to do with equality of expenditures for athletics. And I was asked as an untenured female faculty member to do the Title IX study for the college. I was told later by some folks that it was probably a risky thing to do as an untenured faculty member, but I was too foolish to know that. And what I found was that, of course, there were differences in the way that women's sports were treated compared to men's sports. The expenditures on women's sports were far less. The amount that was spent on coaching and the number of full-time coaches was certainly more for men than for women. And so, again, it took the institution a number of years to rectify those kinds of injustices as well.
Okay.
Over the years, McDaniel's grown, in its diversity, and personally, I think that's like a very important factor of a college of this type. Could you elaborate a little bit of what you had to do with that?
There was a point in my career when I was the director of admissions and financial aid. I've had many jobs at the college, and from that moment forward, it became very important to me to work specifically on diversity at the college, and it has been part of the college's strategic plan ever since. And ever since I've been part of the administration, I have worked very deliberately at both strategic ways that we could affect the diversity of our campus, and also in terms of budget, to both have support here on campus for diverse student body, but also to have specific outreach for students of color. And we have made enormous strides. For a college of our size and our type, we are really doing quite well. This year alone, we have 26% students of color in our applicant pool, which is phenomenal. And we have been working very, very hard, both to have enough financial aid to attract students and also to target our financial resources as well as our admissions visits to exactly the right places to get a diversity, not only of students of color, but a diversity of backgrounds, a diversity of religious traditions, as much diversity as we can possibly have. Yesterday, I was at the SGA inauguration of officers, and it was fantastic. The diversity of the officers who will be running the student government next year was incredible. Every shade, every religion that you could possibly ask for was there. And so it was like a dream come true, that we finally have the kind of representation, at least that I, and I know a lot of my colleagues, have dreamed about for a long time, was standing right there in front of us, running the student government for next year.
Yeah, that's great. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've seen the diversity change among faculty at the school?
That was also a very deliberate effort on our part. We are into double digits, I believe. We're over 10% faculty diversity in terms of faculty of color. Also, it has been a very deliberate change in our faculty in terms of gender. The gender ratio was one of the easier ones to fix. There were very few female faculty members 37 years ago when I came, as I mentioned. Now, I'm sure, I haven't looked at the statistics lately, but I would be very sure that we are probably very close to 50-50, if not 50-50 in terms of gender. In terms of ethnicity and race, I would be quite confident in saying that we are over 10% in our race and ethnicity. Again, that doesn't sound like very much, but for a PhD institution that expects PhDs of our faculty, and for a college of our size, that's pretty good. Is it good enough? No. But for where we are in terms of incrementally moving to where we want to be, we are head and shoulders above where we were, and also head and shoulders above where many of our sister institutions are. As I look at the faculty that we've hired to come on board for next year, I'm also pretty excited at the prospects that I see for improving even further the ethnicity and race of our upcoming faculty.
Can you talk a little bit about the name change?
Oh, I could talk a lot about the name change. 37 years ago when I came, I'm from Pennsylvania, and somebody told me that there was a job opening at Western Maryland College, and I said, I can't drive to Cumberland every day. And that was my very first brush with the name Western Maryland College. We had 3 studies done in each of the decades of those 30 years that indicated that the name was a problem for us. We are not in Western Maryland. We are not a public institution. We're not part of the university system. There was an indication that a fictitious school had better name recognition than Western Maryland College. There was an indication that a fictitious school was thought of more highly than Western Maryland College. So we had a lot of reason to want to change our name. It was a very risky thing to do because there also was a very strong resistance from our alumni and from current students. When I became president, I said to the board chair at that time that we needed to be in a money-raising campaign. and I said to the board chair, we can't change the name at the end of a campaign because people will feel like they've been tricked. We can't change the name in the middle of a campaign because people will stop giving. Either we change the name before the campaign or we don't talk about it for 10 years. And I said I was willing to spearhead a name change, and he said, go ahead and develop a plan, which I did with the President's Council. We did research with 7 other colleges that had changed their name. I came back with the research to the executive committee of the board, talked to each of the members of the executive committee individually, and got them to agree that a name change, at least a study of a name change, would be warranted. And once I got the executive committee on board and had them voting for it, I then went to every member individually of the rest of the board and got them to agree that a name change should go forward. Then we had a vote of the full board, and that was very quickly after I was inaugurated. I was inaugurated in April, and that vote was in October, and we announced the name change in January. It was the shortest honeymoon that any president has ever had. The reaction of the alumni and the current students was exactly what the other 7 colleges told us it would be, and that is they went nuts. The hate mail that I received, the names I was called, it was unbelievable. I believe we have those letters in the archives. Somebody can read them in 50 years, but they were terrible. And the difference between us and the other colleges that had changed their name was the internet. And the internet had not been as prevalent as it was when we changed our name for the college that changed its name before us. And all of a sudden, there was a website for Save Western Maryland College, and within 2 days there were 600 signatures, and it was unbelievable. And it was a growing experience for me. It was a traumatic experience. It was absolutely the right decision. Absolutely the right decision. Our applications went up, our fundraising went up, fewer alumni donors, but more money. I know we have a very different identity. We have now an identity as a private liberal arts college, which is what we are. Right. So it was the right decision, but it was very traumatic.
Did your gender play any kind of role in the name change?
It didn't play. Well, I don't know. Maybe women take more risks than men. I was certainly willing to do it. I don't think that was because I was a woman. I think that's because I had been here and I knew how detrimental the name was. What happened, though, was there were many comments made about my gender in some of the nasty letters. The board chair got a lot of comments about this is what happens when you hire a woman, and he was very shocked about the level of sexism in the complaints and letters that he got. He got more of that than I did. I got some of that, of, this is just like a woman to do something like this. But I didn't get as much of that. I just got horrible comments about me as a person, not me necessarily as a woman. But he certainly got a lot of comments about me as a woman.
In a recent article, you mentioned that you consider yourself a feminist. Could you elaborate on that?
Absolutely, I do. Yes, it said I'm not afraid of the F word, feminist.
Yes.
Absolutely, I think that women deserve equal pay for equal work. I believe that I believe in the Equal Rights Amendment. I certainly think that I I don't know I've never understood what was wrong with that label, and so I consider myself a feminist. I love men. I am not anti-male, and I don't think being a feminist means that one has to be anti-male. But I certainly believe that I believe I got my job because I'm the best qualified person, not because I'm a woman. And I think every job I've ever attained is because I'm qualified, not because I'm a woman. And I think that's the way the world should work. And I have no problem with the label, and it's hard for me to understand why people do. I think anti-feminists have achieved something by making that label seem negative.
Right. Okay, so you just celebrated the success of the Carpe Diem campaign. Did you expect the campaign to be as successful as it was?
Absolutely not. When I took the job as president, the thing that I feared most was raising money. I thought it would be very hard to ask people for money. And what I found was that since I'm not asking for money for myself, it really wasn't hard. It wasn't hard at all for me to go to a person, an individual, or a foundation or a corporation and make the case for McDaniel College. It wasn't hard for me to say, we deserve to be supported, because I believe that we do. It wasn't hard to say, you should donate money to our new academic building because we need more smart classrooms. That was not hard. And so it ended up being, I wouldn't say, I guess I could say fun. It ended up being fun to go places, to talk about McDaniel, to make a case for why you should give money, and you should, when you graduate, give back to the college that was good to you. And so I guess one of the reasons that we were successful is there are lots of people like me who don't have trouble asking for support for an institution and a cause that they believe in.
Would you consider that one of your greatest successes as being president?
I don't think that's my success. I mean, I would love to take credit for that.
Right.
But I can't. It was certainly a lot of effort by a lot of people, and so no, I don't consider that my success.
Okay, so what would you consider some of your greatest successes as president?
I guess I would have to say the name change,
right,
because I really, in my heart, not a lot of people know how much initiative I took in getting the ball rolling. Mm-hmm. That's not very well known at all, and not a lot of people know how much grief I took personally for it. And so, if I were going to be prideful, which I hope I'm not, I would take pride in that. But even there, obviously, it's not me. I mean, it took a huge amount of effort to come up with the name and change the name. So even there, it's not me. I mean, what you learn as president is you can't do it alone. So there's nothing that I've done that I could take a lot of pride in, because there's nothing that I've done alone, and that's the truth. So nothing. I've done nothing. I mean, that's really true. I've done nothing. I've facilitated some things, but you can't do anything by yourself. So put that down. The president who did nothing.
What are your opinions? I know you're an advocate of our Budapest campus.
Mm-hmm.
Could you just elaborate on that,
Well, I've been involved in the Budapest campus from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. And I really believe very strongly in studying abroad. And I have been tremendously proud of what we have accomplished in Budapest. I've been to the old campus and the new campus and have seen the transformation in our Budapest operation, and have been just thrilled at the difference between the two campuses. I think our current facility is beautiful. I've seen the program grow. I've seen our students get to go over there and have life-changing experiences. I wish every student at McDaniel could go to Budapest. I wish we could take them all over. I just think it's that important. And there are very few colleges our size with our endowment who actually have a branch campus someplace else. And I'm just tremendously proud of us for having that, and I wish we could make even better use of it.
What's your favorite part of Budapest, the city itself?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I love the chain bridge. I love to look at the chain bridge at night. And that maybe would be my favorite part of it. There's also a statue called Anonymous, which is this marvelous statue, and he's got a cowl over his face, and it's very he looks very contemplative, and I like that.
Okay.
How has Carroll County changed during your time here, and how has the relationship between McDaniel College and the community grown, changed?
Well, I think the college has become a more integral part of Carroll County. I've heard people talk about the fact that we used to just be up there on the hill and not very much a part of the county. And I'd like to think that we have become much more a part of the county. I've served on the Chamber of Commerce. Ethan Seidel is serving on the hospital board and has served on the Economic Development Board. Lots of our faculty members serve on boards in the county. Joyce Muller's on the library board. Beth Garrell is on the Red Cross board. So lots of us are active in the community and are very much a part of it. We have the Great Decisions series, which many people from the county come to here on campus. I think our diversity efforts, Muhammad Isa has the Ramadan dinner. We have a lot of involvement of our multicultural students and outreach there. Lots of people come on campus for those kinds of things. So I think that I would say that we have lots more activities. The Martin Luther King celebration that we have on campus brings lots of people on campus. Our school system, the Carroll County Public Schools, the Community College, and McDaniel College meet 4 or 5 times a year together so that we can coordinate efforts. That's a real step in the right direction, and we cooperate very much together. The county is less rural than it was, that's for sure, much more suburban. The population has changed, it has grown, become much more suburban, but there's still a rural base to the county, and I think it's still a wonderful place. I brought my son here. I think it's a wonderful place to raise children. I think it's a marvelous place to go to college, obviously, and a wonderful place to go to school. So I think it still retains its charm, and I think it's a very livable community. I think it's still a manageable size. I think the school system is still a manageable size, and I think our school and the community college are all manageable sizes. And I think it's a very unusual county in that all levels of the school system, from kindergarten through college and graduate school, really do work well together. And that is almost unique in the state, to have a county where all elements of the school system, as I said, through even graduate school, work as well as we do together. I think that's a real plus. Well, if we've had all the good questions we can have,
I know, I'm looking.
That's great.
Well, I guess as one last question, what piece of information would you like to pass on to future presidents?
Well, I guess I would hope that McDaniel is always going to be a place that focuses first and foremost on students. You know, our first principles say that we place students in the center of a humane environment, and I think we've always meant that. And the reason that I stayed at McDaniel for 37 years when I intended to stay here only 3 years. I planned when I came to leave after 3 years, and I fell in love with the college and stayed for 37. And the reason is because of the commitment to students and the commitment to teaching. And I hope that future presidents will, in fact, keep that as the heart of the college. I would hate to see us lose that. I think that's what makes us special.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us today.
Well, you're welcome. It was fun.